Jiang Shengsheng gave all her best youth to Lu Mingfei, but who knew that the man would cruelly abandon her? At this time, she met another man. When she lay in the arms of another man, Lu Mingfei, who had always ignored Jiang Shengsheng, realized how wrong he was. Near the end of the year, after domestic affairs were almost settled, Fu Jinji took Jiang Shengsheng abroad. The destination is country A. While it is snowing heavily in China, it is midsummer here. This is a romantic city. At this time of year, the streets are full of jacaranda trees, and clusters of blue and purple flowers on the branches of the trees fall in the wind from time to time. The shadows of jacaranda trees can be seen in every street and alley in the city, making people feel as if they are in a dream, so beautiful. There is a manor under Fu Jinji's name located in the suburbs of this city with beautiful scenery. Jiang Shengsheng could take off her heavy winter clothes, wear a white floral dress and bask in the sun in the front yard of the manor, feeling the long-lost comfort. When Jiang Shengsheng was basking in the sun, Fu Jinji liked to stay with her with a book. When she was in good spirits, they could go for a walk hand in hand in the nearby flower garden. When they got tired, Fu Jinji would carry her back. 3 days passed like this, and on the 4th day, Jiang Shengsheng suddenly took the initiative to suggest going to the hospital for treatment. Fu Jinji had contacted the best doctors and the best equipment in advance. Jiang Shengsheng went for a checkup, but she knew her own physical condition and had already prepared for the worst. Radiotherapy and anti-cancer drugs are the only things we can do at the moment, but they can only prolong the lives of patients in the advanced stage, maybe for a month, maybe a year, that's the limit. The white-haired foreign doctor spoke a foreign language that she did not understand. But looking at Fu Jinji's expression, she knew that there was no good news. She gently held Fu Jinji's hand and comforted him, "It's okay, we'll take it slow." Her words always had an inexplicable magic on him, making him feel at ease quickly. The ending of this road is already known. Now that you have chosen it, just keep going with determination. In this strange land, Jiang Shengsheng began another life, which was also the most difficult and happiest time of her life. It was the dead of winter in China, but the sun was always shining brightly in her foreign country. The radiotherapy process is very painful, and no one will feel relieved by the cramps caused by taking anti-cancer drugs. But she was always surprisingly cooperative, never complaining about the hardship or pain. She knew that when she was undergoing radiotherapy, Fu Jinji stood outside the door and never left for a moment. She was in pain, but Fu Jinji outside the door was in even more pain. He had to watch these treatments torture her body and drain her vitality day after day, and see all the side effects react on her. Jiang Shengsheng began to lose her hair in clumps, and eating became a problem. She could barely eat some porridge before, but now she vomited out whatever she managed to swallow. Fu Jinji began to take care of her every step of the way, feeding her food one mouthful at a time and watching her spit it out in pain. Every time at this time, he was the most silent. At first, he couldn't help but have tears in his eyes, but later he seemed to have accepted this fact. Besides being calm, his face was more like a final struggle with fate in a sad way. Jiang Shengsheng loved to sit by the window in the ward to bask in the sun. Sometimes he would sit there for most of the day and didn't even have the energy to take a walk. Fu Jinji sat with her in front of the window, watching the light and shadow outside the window rise from its initial faint appearance little by little, warming all the coldness in the ward. He always held her hand tightly, put his face close to her hand, and felt her body temperature intently, fearing that she would suddenly feel cold one day. Jiang Shengsheng knew everything. He turned his head and looked into his eyes seriously. "Jinji, don't be afraid. Let's take it slow. It's you who gave me the courage to live. I won't give up so quickly." Fu Jinji had never shown any vulnerable expression in front of her. He reached out and touched her thin cheek, inch by inch, with extreme tenderness. "I know. I'm not afraid. No matter how tragic the ending is, I will be with you." Jiang Shengsheng rubbed his face against his broad palm and suddenly smiled. "Jinji, the weather is so hot, I want to shave my hair, can you help me?" Because of radiotherapy, her hair fell out severely. She originally had long, shiny black hair, but now it is unsightly. Fu Jinji asked someone to bring tools and started to shave her head. He had never done this for anyone before, so his technique was clumsy but extremely careful and gentle. There was never any sign of excessive sorrow or anxiety on his face, but he became more and more silent. He could only watch helplessly the suffering that fate brought to him and his lover. After shaving his hair, Jiang Shengsheng looked at his bald head in the mirror with a smile. "Am I ugly now?" Fu Jinji came forward and moved the mirror in her hand a little further away, so that the mirror could just fit the two of them. "It's not ugly. Look, we are very happy like this." Jiang Shengsheng looked at the two faces so close to each other in the mirror, feeling happy but also mixed with an indescribable heaviness. "Jinzi, let's take a picture." Fu Jinji took out his cell phone and asked the nurse to take a few photos for him. Jiang Shengsheng in the photo was smiling brightly, and his eyes were full of tenderness. Jiang Shengsheng and Fu Jinji welcomed the Chinese New Year in a foreign country. "Although I am not in the country, I still have to celebrate the New Year. Mr. Jiang called several times and asked them to come back to China for a reunion dinner, but in the end Jiang refused every time. The day before New Year's Day, Fu Jinji took Jiang Shengsheng out of the hospital, wanting her to spend the new year at home. It had rained outside and the air was fresh. The layout of the manor was handled by the hired maid, and Fu Jinji personally cooked the reunion dinner. Jiang Shengsheng couldn't help much, so she sat on the sofa outside watching TV and listening to the sounds coming from the kitchen not far away, which made her feel extremely at ease. As night fell, the sound of a car was heard outside the door, followed by hurried footsteps. Knock, 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 someone is knocking on the door. Today Fu Jinji asked the aunts to go home and rest, and Fu Jinji could not hear the knock on the door in the kitchen. Jiang Shengsheng had no choice but to get up and open the door herself. When she opened the door and saw the person who appeared at the door, she was stunned for a moment, then smiled slightly. Jinyan, long time no see. When Fu Jinyan saw Jiang Shengsheng's current appearance, he was stunned for a moment, and then smiled back at her. Shengsheng, the new year is coming, Happy New Year. Before Jiang Shengsheng could even say Happy New Year, Fu Jinyan, who was standing at the door, suddenly gave her a gentle hug. He whispered in her ear, Shengsheng, long time no see. Jiang Shengsheng let him hug her for a while, then turned around and called towards the kitchen, Jinji, Jinyan is here. After a while, Fu Jinji came out, untied his apron, and smiled at Fu Jinyan. You are here just in time, come and serve the dishes. Fu Jinji raised his hand and looked at his watch again. It was almost dawn. It's time. I'm going to set off the firecrackers outside. There were crackling sounds of firecrackers outside the door, and the atmosphere was very lively. A table full of rich dishes was served. The three of them sat together, talking and laughing, and the atmosphere was very harmonious. But Jiang Shengsheng was in poor health, couldn't eat anything, and had no energy to stay up all night to celebrate the new year. Fu Jinji helped her go back to rest, leaving only the two brothers to watch in the living room. Without Jiang Shengsheng, the atmosphere in the room seemed to become colder again. Fu Jinyan looked at his elder brother and found that his face seemed to have become thinner, but he didn't seem as cold as before. Brother, you've been having a hard time recently, haven't you? But Fu Jinji shook his head with tenderness in his eyes. No, this is my happiest time. Suffering seemed to have smoothed away all the cold edges of this man, revealing his naturally warm and soft heart. He is being loved tenderly, and he is also learning to tenderly love this world with her. When Fu Jinyan saw the smile on his lips, he realized that he was overthinking. He silently placed his hand on Fu Jinji's shoulder and patted him twice. As long as you are happy, I came here just to spend the new year with you. I will leave in 2 days. He knew very well that this was Jiang Shengsheng's last year and he should come. Fu Jinji smiled and comforted him. Don't worry about me, I'm doing well. Shengsheng is working hard. She is trying her best to stay with me for a while longer. She didn't give up despite the hardship, so I won't give up either. What if there is a miracle in this world? Fu Jinyan didn't say anything, didn't answer, and couldn't bear to extinguish the so-called hope in front of this man who was silently bearing the severe pain. He simply pulled out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, took them out, lit them up, and took a deep puff. Damn, this world is so painful. The long night has just passed, and the morning light pierces the darkness. After the two brothers had spent the New Year's Eve together and were about to take a rest after washing up, they suddenly heard the sound of glass breaking coming from the bedroom upstairs. Fu Jinji reacted immediately and ran to Jiang Shengsheng's room without even having time to put on his slippers, with Fu Jinyan following closely behind. When I opened the door, I saw the glass for drinking water shattered on the ground, and a small pool of glaring blood next to the glass shards. The bathroom light was on and there was a soft sobbing sound from inside. Fu Jinji hurried over and saw Jiang Shengsheng sitting on the floor, her hands slightly supporting the edge of the toilet, vomiting blood in large mouthfuls. The blood had dyed the porcelain white toilet bright red, and tears were still on her face. Seeing Fu Jinji, she slowly pressed the flush button, as if the blood had never existed. Fu Jinji stepped forward and held her in his arms, then tremblingly took out his cell phone to call for emergency help. Jiang Shengsheng wanted to say something, but suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Her blood was warm, and it just floated on the cold floor. Fu Jinji touched her face and comforted her again and again. It's okay, the doctor will be here soon, very soon. But Jiang Shengsheng grabbed his hand, gently and powerfully. Jinji, don't be afraid, I can still hold on for a long time, don't be afraid, I will be fine. Fu Jinyan, who was standing at the door, saw this scene and realized that the happiness Fu Jinji was talking about was real happiness. They were on the verge of despair and in the abyss together, but they always warmed and comforted each other. They relied on each other's love to fight the torture brought by the illness and supported each other through every pain. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes and Jiang Shengsheng entered the emergency room for the first time. Fu Jinji stood at the door as usual, waiting for her to come out of the radiotherapy room as he did in the past. But this time, what he waited for was a critical illness notice from the hospital. Fu Jinyan saw him standing there like a tall and strong tree, but the thin piece of paper in his hand almost crushed him in an instant. He leaned against the white wall behind him and barely managed to avoid falling down. Even though Fu Jinji had prepared himself mentally, he still could not accept the arrival of this moment. A wave of grief was like a hurricane that shattered every inch of his flesh and blood in his heart. His eyes went dark, but he gritted his teeth and forced himself to hold on. No, she wouldn't lie to me. Fu Jinyan couldn't hold back her tears. She took a deep breath to suppress the sob in her throat. She wanted to say something to comfort Fu Jinji, but when she opened her mouth, nothing came out. This was an ending that everyone could predict, but even he was so sad, let alone Fu Jinji. He took out a cigarette and lit it, then handed one to Fu Jinji. Fu Jinji never smoked before, but this time, he reached out to take the cigarette, his hands shaking constantly. Brother! He called out, but couldn't utter another word. He knew very well that no comfort would be of any use to a man in extreme grief, not to mention that he couldn't even comfort himself. In fact, at this moment, he was already thinking that if Jiang Shengsheng really passed away today, he would not attend her funeral. They had said goodbye at the airport last time. It is enough to say goodbye once in life, preferably while one is alive. There is no need to say goodbye after death, and he does not want such a farewell. I waited in front of the hospital corridor for an unknown amount of time, and there was already a pile of cigarette butts at my feet. Fortunately, after first aid, the man was on the verge of life and death, but was pulled back alive. When Jiang Shengsheng opened his eyes and saw Fu Jinji for the first time, he just grabbed his hand and said apologetically, I made you worry. I told you that I can still hold on. Fu Jinji endured for a long time, buried his head in her hands, close to her body temperature, and finally let a few tears flow out. All his fears were like a knife hanging in the air, ready to fall at any moment and split his heart in two. Jiang Shengsheng touched his head gently, just like coaxing a child, Don't be afraid, I can't bear to part with you. They embraced each other silently, crushing all the pain, fear, and depression into the stars tonight. Fu Jinyan was like a sober bystander, calmly watching this love that was passionately heading towards the end. This kind of love made it difficult for him to breathe, but also made the world envious. 2 days later, Fu Jinyan said goodbye to Jiang Shengsheng again. This time, he left silently without saying goodbye, as suddenly as he came. Jiang Shengsheng's body finally survived the severe winter in China. Spring began in China, and autumn arrived in country A. When Fu Jinji received the 12th critical illness notice, he was no longer as frightened as the first time. He just stood outside the door silently, took out cigarettes from his pocket and smoked one by one. It seems like he's become addicted lately. Although Jiang Shengsheng came out of the emergency room this time, Fu Jinji couldn't help feeling heartbroken when he saw her emaciated appearance. In this world, he is the only one who knows what kind of torture she endures every day, but she is trying her best to get through each day. After that, Jiang Shengsheng no longer sat in front of the window to bask in the sun every day. She began to write letters. Some of them were sent out after they were completed, some were landscape photos she took, and some were carefully numbered after they were completed and then put into a tin box and kept away carefully. She wrote letters to her grandfather in China and took some photos of foreign scenery and sent them to him. After receiving the letters, the old man would call her to talk about the past and the present, but Jiang Shengsheng never talked about the future. Some of the letters were sent to Fu Jinyan, who was on business trips in various places. Sometimes she would receive intermittent letters from Fu Jinyan, with photos of him traveling around these days. Fu Jinyan in the photo looks much more mature, with darker skin and a stronger body. It seems that he has been running around a lot these days. Every letter made Jiang Shengsheng happy for a long time. He kept talking to Fu Jinji, is the desert that Jinyan went to in China? I want to go there too. This sea is so familiar, let's go to the beach to enjoy the breeze next time. This snack looks delicious, let's try it after we return home. Fu Jinji always responded to her requests. As long as he was in front of her, he felt only happiness. After enduring another dark autumn abroad, Jiang Shengsheng's treatment was coming to an end. The attending physician regretfully informed Fu Jinji that the cancer cells were now out of control and any further treatment would only increase the patient's suffering. The fact that Jiang Shengsheng could hold on until now given his physical condition was a miracle in itself. Although the remaining days are short, they can be spent more leisurely. So, Fu Jinji began to pack up and prepare to return home. Jiang Shengsheng didn't ask anything. She slept in Fu Jinji's arms at night. She lowered her voice and whispered, are we going to start traveling? Fu Jinji held her in his arms and said softly and hoarsely, well, this season in China is just right for a walk in the desert. Then, we can take a look at the prairie. If it gets a little hotter, we can go to the beach for a vacation, enjoy the sea breeze, and try those snacks you have never eaten. She reached out and smoothed Fu Jinji's slightly wrinkled brows. Okay, I like it. The next day, Jiang Shengsheng discovered that there was a red pill missing from his usual medicine. It was an anti-cancer drug. Jinji, have you finished taking the medicine? There is one pill missing. Fu Jingji paused while pouring the water, then put the hot water into her palm, half knelt in front of her and said softly, "The doctor said that you don't need to eat this, that will make you uncomfortable." Jiang Shengsheng stubbornly stretched out her hand and said coquettishly, "No, you have to take medicine to get better. Give it to me." Fu Jingji's eyes turned red, but his body did not move. Jiang Shengsheng gently squeezed his hand and urged, "Go quickly, I need to take my medicine." Fu Jingji then stood up silently to get the medicine. Seeing Jiang Shengsheng raising his head and swallowing all the pills, a tear fell unexpectedly. He knew how much she wanted to live, even if she could stay a little longer. But they all know too well that the cruelty of fate lies in the tragedy of having to leave after you have ties and concerns. But at this point, he no longer had any fear in his heart, and he began to accept it all calmly. He leaned over and gave Jiang Shengsheng a deep kiss on the forehead. "Be good, it won't hurt after you take the medicine." In early summer, Fu Jingji brought Jiang Shengsheng back to China. They did not go home or visit anyone, but went straight to the sandy land in the northwest. The sand in the desert is slightly hot from the sun, but very soft. Jiang Shengsheng was no longer able to walk far, so Fu Jingji carried her on his back as they walked around the desert camp step by step. When the wind and sand were strong, he carefully wrapped her headscarf. When she was sleepy, he held her in his arms and let her sleep. They rode camels together and watched the yellow sand flying when the wind blew. Jiang Shengsheng sat on the camel's back, pointed in the direction of the sky in the distance and suddenly exclaimed, "Jingji, look! There is an oasis over there." Fu Jingji looked in the direction she pointed, and indeed saw green grass amidst the yellow sand. But he knew very well that it was just a mirage, illusory and out of reach. He held her hand tightly, his heart filled with emotion. Yes, the oasis in the desert is truly a miracle. Jiang Shengsheng laughed. "Maybe, we will have a miracle, if not, then we will meet again there." She pointed in the direction of the oasis, her eyes still full of hope. Fu Jingji nodded softly, "Okay." Passers-by had never seen such a loving couple, so they secretly took a photo of them and gave it to Fu Jingji. That night, Fu Jingji didn't sleep and looked at the photo all night. He looked at the photos and sometimes smiled faintly, and sometimes his mood suddenly became depressed. After staying in the desert for half a month, Jiang Shengsheng's originally sickly pale complexion darkened a little and he looked much better. But news came from South City that Mr. Jiang was ill. As the old man was getting old, he might not be able to survive this difficult time. Jiang Shengsheng naturally wanted to rush back to see him, so she asked Fu Jingji to buy her a nice wig so that she would look more like a normal person. When we arrived in South City, the old man's health was indeed not very good, but fortunately I was able to see him for the last time. The old man was so sick that he was in a daze, but he still held her hand tightly and shouted, "Meow meow, meow meow." This is Miss Zhang's nickname. The old man cares most about his little daughter who has suffered for half his life. Jiang Shengsheng didn't feel too sad. After all, her family would see each other again soon. There were many relatives that Jiang Shengsheng didn't know sitting beside the old man's bed, including her two uncles, aunt, and niece whom she had never met. All of them had their own lives and families, and only Jiang Shengsheng seemed a little out of place. They tacitly maintained a superficial closeness with each other and Jiang Shengsheng. Except for the old man, everyone in the Jiang family had their own considerations towards their relatives whom they had never met. "Shengsheng, I've been abroad. Look at you, why have you lost weight again?" The old man has been becoming more and more conscious in the past 2 days, but his health is gradually failing. The doctor said it was a last breath. Jiang Shengsheng put on some light makeup and looked pretty good, but her thinning cheeks could not be concealed. She held the old man's hand and said softly, "My granddaughter is just not used to eating outside food, don't worry about me." The old man was connected to an oxygen tube and it was difficult for him to speak. "Shengsheng, the people I feel most sorry for in my life are you and your mother. I made you suffer so much. Please don't hate Grandpa." Looking at the only relative who made her feel warm, Jiang Shengsheng's throat choked up. "No, I have never hated Grandpa, and I believe my mother has never hated you either." The old man slowly reached out his hand and touched her head lovingly, just as he had often touched his daughter's head and told her stories many years ago. "Unfortunately, I was too impulsive when I was young, and I did some wrong things, and I will never have the chance to make up for it in my lifetime." On his deathbed, the old man sighed deeply. "Shengsheng, when you marry Xiao Fu in the future, remember to tell Grandpa, at least, so that I can give an explanation to your mother." Jiang Shengsheng suddenly wanted to cry. Over the years, no matter the people who loved her or the people she loved, it seemed that they were not able to have a good ending with her. The old man left a will before he died, leaving her a very generous inheritance. While many other relatives of the Jiang family were staring and calculating, Jiang Shengsheng had already signed a donation letter. At this point, there was one less person in this world who she could always care about. After she returned to China, Lu Mingfei tried to contact her and wanted to see her again, but she refused. She knew that he was not living well now, but she was at her happiest. However, she still wrote letters every day, some of which she would burn to bring to her relatives in heaven, and some of which she would mail to share her current situation with Fu Jinyan. After dealing with the old man's funeral, Fu Jinji did not stop and took Jiang Shengsheng to High City again, and lived in the small house that Jiang Shengsheng had bought in the town before. He walked in a hurry, not wanting to delay for even a moment, fearing that if he was slow, some things would be too late. The weather was a little hot during the day, so he would watch TV with her and play with the cat. The kitten she left behind was raised plump by Song Chan. In the past year, it had become so fat that it was difficult for her to hold it. When the sun goes down, Fu Jinji lets her sit in the wheelchair and pushes her to the beach to enjoy the sea breeze. Occasionally she would pick up beautiful shells and collect them, taking them home and putting them in glass jars. Song Chan occasionally came to her place for a meal and always praised Fu Jinji's cooking skills. Even when she complained about her husband's cooking being awful, her face was filled with a happy smile. Every time she came, Jiang Shengsheng would pull her into the room and talk to her in private, which Fu Jinji could not bear to hear. One day in the midsummer of that year, Lu Mingfei somehow found this place. He parked the car on the side of the road and saw Jiang Shengsheng pointing at an empty space in the yard and talking to Fu Jinji. "We can plant a large area of roses here in the future, red roses, blue roses are all fine." Fu Jinji was watering the flowers, his eyes full of doting. "I'll listen to you, and then we can build a bigger swing here so we can sit on it when the weather is good." Just by watching from a distance, Lu Mingfei could see the tacit understanding and sweetness between them. She is really happy now. He once possessed all these things, but now he has become a bystander. The two were talking and laughing when they caught a glimpse of someone outside the yard looking over here, and then they noticed Lu Mingfei. The two looked at each other and saw Lu Mingfei. "Shengsheng, long time no see guy." Jiang Shengsheng sat on the chair under the eaves, his attitude polite but distant. "Why are you here, Mr. Lu?" Lu Mingfei knew that she was deliberately treating him coldly, so he took all the medicine and gifts he had brought from the car. "Shengsheng, Mr. Fu, I know you don't want to see me right now, but I brought some medicine this time. I know you don't lack good doctors, but I'm afraid there's no good solution. I asked someone to find some folk remedies that I think will help Shengsheng's current condition. You take them." The person who once loved him the most, now has his heart and eyes full of someone else. Lu Mingfei looked at their loving relationship and felt bitter from the bottom of his heart. The two of them did not accept the things he brought. At this point, they had tried everything they should have tried, and all that was left was to live a good life. "Thank you, but it's no longer necessary. My business has nothing to do with you, Mr. Lu." After saying that, Jiang Shengsheng gently pulled Fu Jinji's sleeve and said coquettishly, "Jinji, the weather is nice today. Let's go to the beach later. There will definitely be a lot of beautiful shells after the tide goes out." Fu Jinji always agreed with her. "Okay, I'll go cook, and we'll go after we finish eating." Their love without paying attention to others made Lu Mingfei feel a little at a loss. He knew he shouldn't have come, but he just wanted to come and see her again. Since she left, he realized that he met different people every day, but people came and went, and only she had ever loved him wholeheartedly. Then, "Shengsheng, I am leaving." Jiang Shengsheng nodded slightly. "Well, I won't see you off." Lu Mingfei smiled bitterly and glanced at Fu Jinji beside her. He actually felt very envious because he now had all her love. He took 2 steps and couldn't help looking back. "This is the last time we meet, right?" Jiang Shengsheng looked up at him and smiled faintly. "Yes, we will never meet again." After getting the answer, Lu Mingfei did not stay any longer and drove away. When he looked back at the courtyard for the last time, he could only see the backs of Jiang Shengsheng and Fu Jinji walking into the house hand in hand. Her back was frail and thin, like a delicate rose swaying in a storm, and this was his last impression of her. For many years afterwards, he would think of this back figure and the person who had disappeared without a trace in his life. He had heard about her death, but he never attended her funeral because she said that this would be the last time they would see each other. Later, he met many people, but no one could make him so worried. Sometimes he often wondered, if he could do it all over again, would the ending be the same? But he also understood that he was not Fu Jinji. He had never cooked for her, planted flowers with her, or favored her infinitely. To be fair, he couldn't give her the happiness that Fu Jinji gave her. So, it seems that losing is reasonable. The summer sea breeze has a hint of saltiness and stuffiness. When evening comes in the town, the beach becomes lively. Some people come here to swim, some come here to play ball on the beach, and some young couples come here for a date. Jiang Shengsheng and Fu Jinji are just an ordinary couple here. They come here every day to pick up some beautiful shells to take home, and then take a walk together, enjoy the sea breeze and watch the sunset. An elderly couple passed by them. The old man was very old and could only use a cane, but he still held the old lady's hand and walked forward step by step. After walking a few steps, the old lady stopped and pointed to the flower bed not far away. "Old man, the gardenias there are blooming." The old man looked in the direction she pointed, smiled and patted the old woman's hand. "Wait for me here." Then the old man came forward with his cane, picked a perfectly blooming gardenia after a long time, and gently inserted it into the old woman's hair. It looks so good and smells so good. The old lady was so happy that she was coaxed into a rage, but she still laughed and scolded him. You are so cheesy at your age. If your grandchildren saw you, they would laugh at you. The old man also laughed. You little brat, let him laugh. What's wrong with me coaxing my own wife? The two of them walked away supporting each other, and just looking at them made people feel happy. Jiang Shengsheng turned his head and saw that Fu Jinji looked a little depressed, so he held his hand lightly. Jinji? Fu Jinji withdrew his gaze, but still failed to hide the envy that flashed across his eyes. I'm here. What's wrong? Are you tired? Jiang Shengsheng pointed at the flower bed over there and said, I want one too, the most fragrant one. Fu Jinji smiled at her gently, took her to the flower bed, and picked a gardenia with the largest and most flower clusters. If you like it, I'll plant it for you in the yard later. Jiang Shengsheng took the gardenia from his hand, and her eyes gradually darkened. It was such a pure white, but it made people feel bleak and desolate. No need, Jinji, let's go home. After returning home, Jiang Shengsheng put all the beautiful shells he picked up today into a jar. Before she knew it, the glass jar was filled with shells. She thought about making a shell wind chime so that when the wind blows, she can listen to the sound and find her way home. But the shell wind chime was not finished yet, and one afternoon Jiang Shengsheng couldn't even hold the shell steadily. She knew that her last moments were finally approaching, and Fu Jinji knew it too.